when we thought about this theme, we began by discussing what should be the objectives and what should we really be doing through this theme. And we felt that one of the major things that we would like people to take away is to locate their practice within the larger political context of deepening democracy. So how do we see social accountability as an exercise that really deepens democracy and promotes a democracy? You heard in the opening plenary how spaces are shrinking and how this is a very important tool that we shouldn't let go, because it is one of the ways that strengthens democracy really. And the second thing that we thought when we envisaged this particular theme was we would create discussions which would enable participants to critically reflect on your own practices of accountability and governance. So really, you know, looking within and seeing and examining the things that we've been doing all these years, and trying to see if our exercises also feed into deepening the exercise of democracy. And finally, we expected that through these discussions and inputs from people across the country and the way in which they engaged with social accountability practices, we would, participants would be able to really question the opportunities and limitations of global indicators that are set, and in a way that all of us are willy-nilly forced to follow. So, you know, the SDG, universal health coverage, other international agencies that are pushing for social accountability. How does it affect our practices? And what do we take away really from it?
What's happened in the world, I mean, social accountability, which has been mentioned in the plenaries and also in the sessions yesterday, it has been sort of co-opted into a technical, apolitical, acontextual approach. So what you end up doing is a tool-based, short-term project, inadequate attention to local context. You start with transparency, some kind of information that's produced, and immediately you think that people are going to take this information and make claims. There's a feeling that you act first and you can learn later your lessons. And what's resulted is a large number of small-scale fragmented efforts. And what the focus of these kind of tool-based approaches is very narrow outcomes, basically, you know, health outcomes or service delivery outcomes. And this has been mainly a large part of the social accountability work that's going on. Many of these tools are well known to you, citizen report cards, social audits. You know, you take the tool, you can place it anywhere. This is problematic from many points of view. But mainly, I think the big problem in using this kind of short-term projectized approach to social accountability is it misses the fact that social accountability is really an ongoing effort of collective engagement of citizens or people, if they're not citizens, with state or other institutions that are providing public services, and the efforts are to claim accountability for people's rights. So if you take this kind of definition, which is, I think, the kind of definition we want to be working with, then you can't think of it as a small-term project. Projects might have their role, but it's a long-term ongoing engagement. So what's happened in progressive thinking is to try and think more strategically about how can we think about strategically about social accountability. And so in contrast to this tool-based approach, the strategic approach, as Jonathan Fox calls it, involves long-term iterative engagement, so ongoing engagement over the long term around social accountability. To work with existing context, not to think that you can pick up a tool and apply it anywhere in the same cookie-cutter fashion. You want to work with transparency, but only transparency and actionable information that can lead to accountability, not just transparency for transparency's sake. You also, the strategic approach involves ongoing learning, applied learning as you go along, as you learn lessons. You shift your strategy in what's called in the development world adaptive learning. So you adapt your tools and techniques as you go along. And the whole idea of this new sort of strategic approach is not just to complete your projects and get your outcomes, but to build movements and coalitions that can last and sustain over the longer period. And the interest, of course, is broader outcomes than the narrow outcomes of services. Those, of course, are important. You want better health outcomes, but you also want to improve the political capabilities of people and challenge power relationships, build that capacity within government. So normally, when we think of social accountability, we think that's the relationship we're interested in. There are communities of people who are being denied services, marginalized people. There are CSOs, grassroots groups, movements that are helping mobilize, increase awareness, that are also helping them negotiate and engage with service providers. And that's the focus of most of the work that we see on social accountability. But actually, these grassroots groups are actually the bottom of a whole world of accountability systems that are existing in the world. And so a lot of work just happens at this very local level, and it's been partly successful, but happens not to address some of the systemic issues that plague many public services. And the idea is to look at this whole world and look at the different levels. There's the local, subnational, national, international. There's a lot of what we might call accountability ecosystems. This word, I think, Brendan, you came up with it in collaboration with other people. There's a whole system of accountability that exists in the public sector without even having social accountability. So there's a court system, there are legislatures, there are politicians and political parties that are also accountable. There's traditional and social media, the private sector, informal institutions and social norms. This is like all happening around this accountability landscape. And I want to suggest 3 ways in which this strategic approach attempts to push this thinking forward. So the first thing is to think on multi-level, at multiple levels. So not just this very local level of communities, grassroots groups, and service providers, but next please, to think upward and downward, depending on where your community-based practices. It could be at the district level, it could be at the very local level, and some CSOs also work at the national level. So you need to link with both above and below your particular level that you're working with.
Because that's one of the bleeds into one of the core values of the community work we have been doing, because it is encourage in more bottom-up approach rather than top-down. So that's why we started Loving Theatre, and we try to incorporate theatre. I'm a public health person, so I turned into theatre because of some of the boys' work. This is him, and he developed theatre of oppressed, and there are few components, but we have been working mainly on foreign theatre. One of the main reasons to use foreign theatre, it is bilateral, not one-way communication. It's more interactive. It creates a theatre for people to express their feelings, and it is a very good way of understanding determinants and also addressing determinants and generating dialogues within the communities on a number of health issues. Very briefly, the structure of the theatre. There are 3 main characters: the oppressor, the problem maker or the problem, the oppressed, the victim, mostly the community or community members most of the times, and also there's a facilitator, the person who break the ice and hold the session and put questions into the audience. And also, most interestingly, in this approach, the audience is not just spectators, they are being called spectactors. So they also have a part in the drama. So the play was stopped, and then the question was put into the audience: what would you do if you are in that situation? So audience were asked to come, they were given the opportunity to replace the characters, and I'm not going to play those because we don't have time, but a couple of people came in, and one girl came up to the stage, and she talked to the mother, and then mother did not listen to her. Then she talked to her sister, and both of them persuaded her mother to stop that person coming into the party. And also there was another girl who came in, and she could not control the initial situation. Uncle Larry came in, and then he offered the ticket. She simply walked away. So it generated sort of discussions. So we use the principles of forum theatre, and in Sri Lanka we developed some projects in rural part of Sri Lanka to address teenage pregnancy in some rural villages. So drama is very powerful. So that's why we'll are working on this method, but there are limitations. In forum theatre, there are limitations, there are a number of publications about the limitations in our experiences. It's sometimes not very powerful in addressing the power system. Because sometimes in the community, in the audience, the oppressor and the oppressed is in the audience. People may not want to come up with their ideas because they are in fear of challenging the power system existing in the village. That was a problem. So we had to address those problems in one of our ongoing works in developing community intervention to address alcoholism in villages.
This, the presentation and the discussion I'm having with you concerns a 16-year-old that I have picked as an example to show how social accountability can be powerful for community transformation and improvement of social services, health, but also reduction in sexual harassment. In Uganda, we have the incidence of HIV and the prevalence among young people, adolescent girls and young women, 15 to 14 is estimated to be 4.2% for women compared to 2.4% for boys. And the intervention was to combine both social accountability and legal empowerment. Now, what was the approach? There were many interventions that the organization got involved in, including having safe spaces for the girls and training them in legal empowerment and later working with local leaders. And we started now getting many cases. And one of the standing out cases that I'm speaking about is this 16-year-old girl. So she had gone for a party and she hired a boda boda. A boda boda in Uganda is a motorcycle to take her back home. So now this man took advantage and raped her on the way. It was late in the night, and after raping her, he asked her whether she had identified him. You see, many of the rapists would want to find out whether a girl has identified them, and if the girl says they have, then she can't survive. But we had trained them that if someone asks you such a question, please just let them know that you don't know them. And indeed, she did the same thing. So she walked back home, and the parents were very rude and harsh against her. Where are you coming from? Even when she tried to explain, the parents couldn't listen to her. But we told them that for you to be able to survive this, the first person is you. So she kept calm. In the morning, she walked herself back to a health center where they were being trained from, and she reported this to the village health team leader who worked with local councils. They went to police. They arrested the man. They went back to the scene, and her underwear was there, and the man was arrested. And then they came back to us, and then we took over the case. Why I specifically picked this case is because although many girls came up to complain, but this is a girl who stood out and used all the local leaders as we had actually trained them to do. Going to the local councils, to the health teams, and she went to the health center, and in the health center she received PEP, at least to prevent if there is any likelihood of HIV. And this is one of the classic cases where we saw that even the state attorneys were involved, and they actually had been receiving criminal cases, but they are taking them on the face value without looking at the bigger, question of community empowerment. And then we saw even judicial officers from magistrates up to the judge being involved on this issue of gender-based violence, sexual violence, and how these cases should be handled in courts of law. And what was standing out is the man who was arrested. For him, he never saw this as a problem. He continued telling the judge that, look here, I didn't do anything bad to her. After all, it was just a one-time rape. If she wants money, I can sell my motorcycle, I even have land, I can give her the money. So throughout the entire prosecution, he seemed not to understand. But this is one of the cases where we saw local governments come up and stand out with the communities.
All of us are aware that maternal mortality has declined in India. The government of India is committed to reduction of maternal mortality and the SDG goal. However, even today, a lot of women continue to die needlessly from pregnancy and childbirth-related causes. And when we look at who are dying, most of these women are young women. They are from poor families, and most of them are from rural areas. So this effort which I'm going to share, is by an alliance called SOMA, Rajasthan White Ribbon Alliance, and it has been started and initiated and anchored by Chetna. So with the Network Alliance partners, we did a lot of engagement with women, particularly because we regarded them as right holders. And there was a lot of awareness and action initiated at the community level, informing women about their entitlements. And in the process, women shared a lot of stories. Several of experiences about their efforts, the struggles they had to make when they went to public health systems, when they went to access health care services. And this inspired us to create some space for airing or strengthening these voices and making government accountable to take actions on what women are saying. So in earlier times, we did a lot of public hearings, public dialogues, which were events where the duty bearers and women came together and women spoke about their issues. And this continued for a lot of, say, a couple of years. But when we were constantly talking to women, we realized that there is a need for space, a different space, which is local and which is always there. And when we started talking to women and basically discussing about what are these spaces and where they want to take their issues, there were two solutions. One was talk directly to the provider or talk directly to the medical officers and make a complaint. And when that option was discussed, a lot of women were not willing. There was a fear of backlash. Another option which women themselves said was we could go to the Gram Sabhas or village assemblies, which are mandated in our constitution. Our partners also felt that this is a local mechanism mandated by the Constitution of India, so you don't have to create a special space. So we said, okay, let us try and use this space, which is already there, mandated by the Constitution of India. So on one hand, we were talking to women, listening to what they want to say, exploring what are the possible ways, options of solving those problems, letting women decide what they want to do about it. On the other hand, we started with working with the system, the panchayat system, the rural development system. But given the social structure, it was very difficult for women to participate in these meetings along with men. So we felt that there is a need to create separate or special spaces where women can come, women can speak what they want without any pressure of, or without any social pressure of covering their wheels and not speaking up. So this went together, and we worked with the Panchayat department. We got orders for organizing women's village assembly, which is called the Mahila Gram Sabha, because there was a need to create that space specially for women. We mobilized women, we worked with the families, we pacified men that it would not be threatening to them. We also worked with the Sarpanch because they were scared that if women come, I will not be able to face them. So we worked with both the women and the system, and over the years, we were able to track at least 49 gram sabhas.